Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission, I've been updating you at each of our meetings about the work of the public outreach, and now we'll have our first chance to hear in depth some of what they've been hearing. Many of you have participated in one or more of the elements of public outreach. I know that every Commission member that's had a chance to do so has been enormously impressed by what they've seen and heard. We're all sophisticated enough in our own businesses to know that that doesn't happen by accident. It is planful to organize something that appears to be that is in fact seeking open input still requires organization and effort. And so that's been the work of the Murphy Epson consulting team. I will tell you that I have personally been at almost every one of the activities that they've sponsored and on our behalf, and it's really been extraordinarily well done. And I think we should be very pleased. And Kathleen, thank you to you and your team for the excellent work. So it's my pleasure to introduce to the Commission Kathleen Murphy, principal of the firm of Murphy Epson. Kathleen developed our strategy for public outreach and built the team that has been conducting it and has been supervising the work, and she'll lead us through this session.
Okay, thank you very much. It's great to be here and see so many of you in person. A lot of you have shown up at our public meetings, and that's been great to have you there, and I think everybody left impressed with the dedication and the passion of the folks that have attended these meetings. I'd like to introduce our team for you. Starting at the far end of the table is Dr. Pat Hicks with the Outcomes Management Group. Next to her is Larry Price with L. Price and Associates. And then to my immediate side is Danny Palmore with Columbus Policy Works. And not able to be here today is Engage Public Affairs, who also has participated in the public meetings and also in the focus groups. We wanted just to start out, before we get into the details and the nitty-gritty on this, on just some general observations. Some of the things that struck us as we've done these different events around town and conducted our postcard campaign. And I wanted just to start out by saying that uniformly across the board, the comments that we've gotten, the attitudes, the passion has always been focused on the kids, focused on the students, what's right for the kids, that they deserve a good quality education. They're very sympathetic to the poverty and some of the circumstances that our youth find themselves in. And they are very supportive of programs that help students across the board. So that was one observation I had, and each of us will talk a little bit about their observations, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what we've heard. So, Danny?
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. Good afternoon. One of the things that after about the third meeting I noticed was that everyone was very interested in our school system and wanted to have a say, and also was very, very engaged in the exercises and what it was we were putting forward. Culturally, it was not limited to public school teachers, students, or the parents. We had a number of people that were engaged from every socioeconomic ladder. The LGBT community was very engaged, and we had very good meetings with them. Also, not only the racial, it was very multicultural. We had parents there from charter schools. We had a few from public schools because they wanted to know what it was we were doing it, how we were doing it, and they were very, very engaged. So I was really proud to see so many people in our community, in our very diverse community, that wanted to be a part of this community engagement. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Price.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's blinking at me. You think I'd be used to this, having been in committee, how to push the button. Good afternoon again. Let's try that. There has also been a consistent theme and a yearning for something better, whether it be community leaders, pastors, teachers, parents, or students. Everyone believes that our school system can be made better. And I think the ideals that they have shared reflect those thoughts. So as we begin and go through sharing some of those ideals, you will see that again, everybody understands that while Columbus Public Schools is a good system, it could be a better one. And I turn over to my.
Good afternoon. Regardless of the solutions or the good ideas that were proposed during our conversations, it became apparent that one size doesn't fit all when we begin to implement those solutions and ideas. Because of the size of our system, the location of schools, the growing diversity of the students and parents that are in our community, the diverse cultural perspectives of all of our stakeholders, the varying utilization of existing resources, as well as the varying access to those resources and tools, all impact implementation. We have a large, multicultural, diverse system.
I want to take just a few minutes to talk about the process. How did we get so many people involved in the community engagement? Initially, what we did is we divided up the city into 4 quadrants. We made it a point to have 2 meetings, 2 public meetings in each of these quadrants. We had them at 6 o'clock, so we knew it was important that not only did we have the meeting, that we engaged them and we fed them. So we gave them dinner. The other thing that we did, we had these mostly at high schools and a couple of elementary schools, but we didn't stop there. We literally went to all of the feeder schools that surrounded the place where we were having the meetings. We did robocalls. We did our own. We engaged the principals at these schools so that they did their list of robocalls. And some of you may have gotten a call from me because I was also calling, inviting people to the meetings. We had our cards that I'm sure you're familiar with. These were at libraries. These were also in places where people would congregate, so they had an opportunity to know that we were actually doing something. We've also done a lot of one-on-ones with students, with teachers, and I took the opportunity at every social event that I took my information, told them what they were missing, come over to the schools, and we were able to engage quite a few people in what it was we were doing. We made just basic calls to people that we knew would like to be engaged in this, and so we were able to have anywhere from 60 to 100 people at some of our meetings. I would like to talk about the focus groups, but I will turn that over to Dr. Hicks, and she'll tell you about those.
Well, before we get to the focus groups, I want to talk about the area commissions and the faith-based outreach. And I'm not going to talk as much about the area commissions because a lot of those came to our focus groups. And so when we talk about the general things, we'll be covering their concerns. But let me talk momentarily about the faith-based community. I have been impressed, and I want to thank Reverend Otha Gilliard for his commitment not only to this commission, but also to the faith-based community. He's been out there and he's been sharing and he's been selling the idea that we need to make Columbus a better place for our children. A couple of emerging themes. Pastors, want to be a part of the neighborhoods and communities that their schools reside in. They interact on a daily basis with the students who attend those schools. The parents usually come to them to mentor and work with those same students. And they would like also for the church to play a greater role with the school system in general. And the last emerging thing was they would like for the church life centers, recreation facilities, and also the churches in general to be used by the schools and in conjunction with the schools. A couple of good ideas I'll share with you that came out of it. The Adopt a School initiative, which came through the Baptist Pastors Conference, the Baptist Ministerial Alliance, the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance. On March 16th, they're holding an all-day seminar, and they're bringing in a gentleman, flying in a gentleman to instruct and share with them how they can adopt a school. So they're taking this initiative seriously. They want to also allow the pastors to work with troubled youth. They talked about how can male role models go into the schools and be that male role model for those families, single head households and those children that need that kind of mentoring. They also want to sit in on classes from time to time with Columbus Public Schools and other schools. They also would like to provide a safe haven for students after school in their churches. As you well know, that's between 3:30 and 6 o'clock may be prime time for break-ins and crime among our youth. So they want to be a part of the school system in terms of allowing some of our church to be those safe havens that they can be at between 3:30 and the time that their mothers or fathers get home. They also would like to work with single-parent students and be role models to them and commit a better relationship between the schools, neighborhoods, and the churches. And the last is a letter of support. The Baptist Ministry Alliance is putting together a letter of support to send to this commission in terms of supporting this commission for the work that you do. And then the last one again would be the Baptist Ministry Alliance, the Baptist Pastors Conference, and the Denominational Ministry Alliance holding this Adopt a School program. So what you do is important, but they want to work with you, alongside of you, to make our school system the best school system that it can be. Thank you.
We hosted 4 focus groups, and we had 92 participants in those focus groups. And as Danny mentioned, they were across the 4 quadrants of our community. And we began our focus groups by discussing components of a good 21st century education. And across the focus groups, several components emerged, among them being the importance, of course, of parental involvement, the need for teachers to be committed and to have high expectations, to make sure that there's a school climate that's safe, as well as one that challenges students to succeed, the importance of access to appropriate tools, community support, accountability at all levels, students, parents, family members, community, everyone should be accountable, and a holistic approach to teaching. The barriers that were identified in our focus group, and again, this is sort of common themes, was that there's apparent to some of our participants that there was a lack of high expectations, and when students aren't expected to do well, they don't. That some of our parents are uncertain about how to support their students. Some of them weren't privileged to have a good education themselves, and so it makes it difficult for them then to know how best to support their children. The barrier around poverty and hunger and mental health issues, the fact that discipline is an issue and distracts the teacher and the students from learning. The focus, I'm sure that you've heard repeatedly, on testing versus learning, class size, and bullying. The insensitivity there regarding differences, be it culture, race, sexual orientation, or learning styles. And then we also talked about the community and the rich resources that we have, and more importantly about how we could actually leverage our great resources to make our school system better. And the suggestions that came forth was that we should really take advantage of these resources because we could certainly enrich the student experience, help our students to really get a better understanding around what the job expectations are and various career paths. And also, by involving some of our other programs, we could then not have to utilize some of the dollars that we have in our general school funding. Ways in which they thought that we could engage the community was certainly to involve our neighborhood associations. They liked the focus groups, and they thought that it would be great to host groups, not just when something's going on, but to periodically check in with the community and have conversations with them. Open the door and welcome residents in as volunteers. A lot of our seniors are very interested in, they're retired and they want to come in and help in the schools in any way that they can. Ramp up our partnering with organizations that already fund and operate summer and after-school programs because there's such a need in the after-school area, and to also spend time making sure that we invite our businesses to partner with us. So that sort of is a high level of our conversation in our focus groups.
Thank you, Pat. I'm going to talk a little bit about the public meetings. We've had 7 public meetings to date. We've had an 8th meeting with teachers. Thank you, Rhonda, for hosting that, where we had about 200 teachers show up at East High School. That was a great session. We also did another session with young professionals and got their perspective on education in our community. And we have one more special meeting coming up with the I Know I Can parents, and also another public meeting yet at East High School. All in all, when you count up all the people that have been touched by our outreach, it's well over 2,000. To date, we've gotten about 1,500 postcards back, and I'll show you a few examples of some of the postcards we've gotten back from folks. And we've touched probably at least another 500 in our public outreach efforts. So it has been very rewarding to have people come forward and want to share and talk about their ideas that will improve our system. And they are very passionate that you, the commissioners, understand their ideas and that you understand their passion and commitment to really doing something positive. They're committed to helping you, standing alongside of you, improving the schools. They are very, very concerned about the future of the students in our community. The way our public meetings are set up, we break into small tabletop discussions. You can see one of the tables there, and we start out usually by asking people, how many of you feel you got a good education when you were in school? And invariably, almost everybody in the group raises their hand. And then you start talking to them, well, what about it made it good? And they talk about quality teachers, the teacher that really encouraged them. Or they talk about the arts and how they loved music and how they were in the band and how that made a difference. Or they talked about sports and how they got involved through sports and a coach who really encouraged them to do well in school. Those were the kinds of themes that started to arise as we talked about those. We eventually moved into, well, tell us your ideas. You know, now that you've talked about what's good and what makes a system strong, what are ideas that you think students today should have incorporated into their schools? And those ideas were many and plentiful, I can tell you that. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the general themes that emerged, because as we went through the process, there were a lot of ideas that seemed to resonate and come back frequently and more frequently in our discussions. The first theme is that teachers really are at the heart of the educational system, and they need our support. They need our support in terms of funding. They need support in the classroom. They need support in terms of classroom sizes that they can manage. They need support in terms of translators. I had one kindergarten teacher who said, you know, I have 25 kids in my class. They speak 5 different languages. They do not come to my class able to speak English. I cannot talk to their parents because their parents don't speak English. I have to run around and find translators when I do a parent-student conference so that I can talk to these parents. If the school could just help me find translators, that would be a big help. Those kinds of stories are repeated over and over again, where teachers have gone out of their way to try to communicate with parents, pay for shoes, pay for backpacks, pay for pencils. It's very clear that they are looking for support. And when we talk to parents, parents seem to be very supportive and very proud of the teachers that their students had. It's not to say that they were all on that same page. They did say that poor teachers and those that weren't interested shouldn't be in the classroom anymore, and that accountability was important. But all in all, the teacher emerged as the most important ingredient in the successful education of any student. Another theme, and this was the second most noted theme, was the idea of discipline. And strong, consistent, effective classroom discipline was essential. Too many students acting out. We had one middle school student in one of my groups, and she said, you know, we've got kids that have a lot of problems, and they stand up and they demand the teacher's attention. And there's no time for me when I have a question about an assignment, because my teacher is too busy dealing with those students that have more needs and are more aggressive in the classroom. that kind of theme was repeated by students quite a bit. They are looking for attention. The acting out student is getting that attention, and it's having a negative impact on those students who want to learn. At the same time, we're hearing that people are sympathetic to those students that are acting out. They understand they have problems. They feel they should be dealt with separately, taken out of the classroom, and given help. We had one young boy who was a middle school student who said, it doesn't do any good to expel them from school. That's what they want. They're not learning anything, so we've got to figure out what we can do. So that, again, that focus on kids doing something positive and supportive to change the system came through over and over again. Another theme was what you've heard before, is that community, business, and parental involvement will elevate the success of our schools. That was really central to success, that schools need help, whether it's businesses coming in to talk about career choices, to helping students understand what the possibilities were for jobs down the road, to give summer internships. Schools should have outreach plans, that they work with the communities. The communities want to step up and help. We had two members of the Northland Area Commission at one of our workshops, and they said, we want to be mentors. We want to come in and help schools. It's just hard for us to develop those relationships, and nothing seems to be happening. So there's really that interest in schools. It's just sometimes hard to make those connections. On parental involvement, we heard a lot of stories about parents not knowing how to be parents and needing some help with that. And one of the good ideas that came out of an LGBT meeting was, you know, if we're going to do pre-K, in pre-K, maybe we can also have an effective parenting class, because that's when parents are most involved with their kids, is when they're really little. And if we could get parents at that age to help them understand how to support their kids' education and what they need to do when their child moves into elementary, middle, and high school, that would be well worth it. So lots of ideas like that came forward around parental involvement, community and business support for the schools. That whole notion, it takes a village, we heard that over and over again. Another theme was technology that works, is available, and regularly used by every student and teacher. I did a focus group, or a little group with middle school students, and they all said, iPads for everybody. You know, we could submit our homework by email. We could put our textbooks on the iPad so we could take them home at night. A lot of times we have to leave our textbooks at the school, or a lot of times the textbooks are out of date. We could get updates on our iPads, and how cool would that be? And they were all excited about that possibility. So simple things, you know, and you think about your workplace and your business environment, and kids are thinking the same kinds of things should be possible for them. They should be able to communicate by email. They should be able to go to a website and see what their homework assignments are. They should be able to submit things via email to their teacher. So that kind of access to technology came through over and over. The other aspect of that is teacher training on technology. There's too much technology that's out of date, that's slow, that is ineffective. Teachers don't necessarily know how to use it, and after trying a couple times, they just give up and don't use it in the classroom anymore. The last theme that I'm going to talk about is the notion of stronger neighborhood schools. People felt they promote parental involvement, closer communities, and they also foster community support for that school. The people in general love the lottery schools. They feel they spur innovation and they're very high quality. They just want that same high quality at their neighborhood level so that they don't have to put their children on buses. One parent told us that their middle school child has to be at the bus stop at 5:45 every morning for an hour-and-a-half bus ride to school. That means another hour-and-a-half bus ride home. So that's 3 hours on the bus just to get to the school that that parent wants that child to attend. If they had neighborhood schools that were of the same high quality, they would feel comfortable sending their child there, and they would build relationships with parents that are their neighbors, that those neighbors would know those kids who walked down the street to their school, that if the child didn't know the homework, they could call up the neighbor child and say, hey, what was my homework assignment last night, and when is this due? those things are lost when there aren't neighborhood schools. So there is a lot of support out there, a lot of community groups actually that are forming. Clintonville Go Public, Southside Stay. There's another one up in the Centennial area that's getting going, that are focused on what can we do to strengthen our neighborhood schools, and how can we as parents and community support the strengthening of our neighborhood school. I'm going to just show you a few of the 1,500 postcards that we've gotten back, and we're getting them back from everybody, from students, from kids, from teachers, from parents, from business folks. This is one from a student who's 13. Her name is Angelina, and she can say, this is her good idea. She's going to take notes and save them for other kids who need them for their education. So again, even kids are trying to help other kids get that education. This was a postcard that says, let me see if I can read it here. Parents are not able to help students with homework. Kids today are learning a level over them, so they need an after-school program to help them, and programs to show parents how to help their children. This theme came through, that parents just don't know. They're not able to tackle the material. They want to help, but they don't know how to. This was obviously from a parent. It said, my son is in kindergarten with 27 other children. This seems like a lot of little children for one teacher. And then finally this one, which is kind of what you heard this morning, have bigger plates for lunch. When I'm hungry, it's hard to learn. And this was from a Dominion 8th grader. To kind of wrap up our presentation here and let you ask us some questions, I want to show you a TV spot. This spot will start tomorrow. It's a spot that encourages people to get involved and pushes them to libraries and other locations where we have our postcard campaign. As you remember, the postage is paid already on these, so all people have to do is really write their good idea down and drop it in the mailbox, and it eventually comes back where we categorize them all. So here is our
I'm
spot.
thinking of being a teacher.
I want to be a scientist.
When I grow up, I want to be a veterinarian.
Education. It's about your kids, your neighbors, and their kids. It's about the future of Columbus. Educating our children is everyone's responsibility. You can help. Tell us your good idea for improving education in Columbus. Just mail in this postcard you'll find at Columbus libraries and other locations. Or visit reimaginecolumbuseducation.org.
That's it. So we're here to answer any questions you have and illuminate anything we've said already.
Okay, thank you for sharing those observations. Appreciate it. Why don't we now take it to the council members for questions, observations? Councilperson Perkins.
Thank you. During the focus groups, were you able to determine what the community's view is of a high-quality school or high-quality education? What were their views on what makes their schools high quality?
Well, I think I think we sort of captured the theme consistently in the focus groups. The high quality, it starts, again, as Kathleen mentioned, they talked about the teacher and the fact that they felt that the teacher needed to have high expectations. And that was really emphasized repeatedly. A high quality education, they felt also, was all about making sure that the parents were involved and that we take advantage of some of the parenting resources that already exist. I think there's the parent consultants in some of the schools, those don't exist. And so they wanted to see us really make sure that parents were engaged and we leverage those resources. They talked about the tools. Again, some of the places, the technology, as Kathleen mentioned, they mentioned in the focus groups, the computers weren't working and they wanted them to work. They wanted their kids to have access to the technology so that they could really be prepared for the 21st century. The other thing that they talked about was, with regard, we haven't mentioned this earlier, but abilities. The fact that right now, when we group kids and we have children in a class and they have different levels of learning and abilities and how those really impact. And some of our focus group participants understood that the research suggests that grouping shouldn't matter, but they were saying it does matter. And so that was something that was discussed at length. Making sure that we met the student where the student was. So whatever the student's learning style was, they wanted to see teachers be able to do that. And they felt that that wasn't taking place as much as it could be because of the focus on testing. I think those are the main things that come to mind for me with regard to what the quality education would look like.
Yes, Reverend.
I'm sorry, if I may just add one quick point to that. Also, I was mentioned several times was equal/equity in funding. I mean, that was a consistent theme also, that they thought the funding was an issue, whether it be equal or whether it be equity, and we kind of broke that down, but bottom line was there were a lot of concerns along those lines.
Yeah. I want to, first of all, thank you very, very much for your information. And I think that what you've demonstrated is that the very areas in which you found that the focus groups have focused on are the very areas that I think all of the presentations and so forth that we've received focus right upon. Teachers. And I certainly can't answer for you in terms of the what's a good school. But I can say from what you're coming up with the focus groups is that, of course, whenever we hear of schools being graded, we know a good school from one that's not, because a good school is get good grade. And a school that's not getting a good grade is not considered to be a good school. And I think that these areas are really wonderful areas. And, of course, my interest is, of course, in the parenting area. And I really think that what has been talked about, and we've talked about a little bit, is that parenting is something that you can learn. You might not have learned it when you were coming up or whatever, but you can learn those skills. And I think that what the groups are saying is that these parenting classes should be done at an early age when the kids, young kids, and I think that that's excellent. And I'm certainly hoping that some of that would be implemented in terms of what would take place here, because I think it'll be wonderful for it. Thank you.
Ms. Crane.
Thank you, and again, thanks to the group. So I have a comment and a question, and I'm not exactly sure who the question goes to, but I know in our business, as well as I'm sure many around the table, conduct surveys, ask for input from our associates, but as valuable as getting their input is the response back. So, we always share our results and share, where we're going. So I guess my question is, clearly we've set expectations, and there's a million good ideas out there, and I don't think we'll be able to address all of them. So I'm just curious about expectations from all the public forums, the focus groups, the 1,500 postcards that are coming back, and what are we setting up here, and how are we going to respond, and then how do we follow up? What's the follow up after the commission recommendations?
And that's a great question. I think when we're talking in the community, the people that are sending us information and coming to these meetings want to make sure that you hear their voice. And that's why you get a kind of a quick overview all the time on community engagement. You get something in your binder all the time about community engagement. Our calendar has been to get out in front of your recommendations so that our work informs your work, so you know what the community values and what the community is looking at. As far as the back end of this, we were talking about there does need to be some reporting back once the recommendations are done in some kind of public setting that says your ideas were heard, and here's how you can see them in the recommendations that are being advanced by the commission. And I think that's really important to draw that connection, and for you as commissioners to understand understand the passion that's out there for school improvement and the willingness of the community to step up and do their part, whether they're a parent, a businessman on the street, end of the street where the school's located, or just a retiree who wants to volunteer. People are ready, they are waiting, and they are going to be supportive. They want to see that you have listened to them, and they will step up and do their part.
Yes, Augustine.
Yes, okay, so for me, what stood out the most in your presentation was the cards from the children. So I guess I'm wondering why wasn't maybe if there's time, a focus group so we can hear from the kids. I mean, we're talking about them and, all of these things affect them, and they have some great input, because they are in the classroom every day. Is there room for that?
First of all, that is excellent. We did hear that. We had a couple of tables at a couple of our meetings that was only students, and their input was very, very insightful, and we have been discussing that opportunity to possibly do that, and I think we had a chance to talk to you about that, so thank you very much for bringing it back to our attention.
Other questions? I have one. Relative to other work you've done like this, what is the level of awareness? I mean, there's always going to be a group of highly engaged community members and parents and kids. How broadly is our work, are people aware of the fact that there is activity going on, thinking about the system? How deeply do you see this disseminated?
That's hard to gauge. People that come to our meetings definitely are aware. They know what's going on. I think with the TV spot, there's going to be a lot more people that know what's going on, and they're going to participate. I think there's a sense out there that the commission is doing its work, and it is tied to the mayor. A lot of people associate the mayor with the work of the commission. And I think their interest in the commission is to make sure, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, that their voices are heard as part of the process. So it's hard to really know, but the people that come to our group are pretty aware.
Yeah, partly I think Tanya's question is an important one, which is once you engage in this kind of work, you set expectations in some level that there's going to be listening and action that relates to that work. And so I think it is important for all of us to be at least conscious of the fact that there are expectations around whatever we're doing, thinking about, and what are the implications of that. So,
yeah, and I would add that almost every special session that you had one today on health and fitness, you had one on arts. We're hearing that when we're out. I mean, last night I had one person say how important recess was, and it should never be eliminated because that's where kids learn game strategy, and they get socialized, in recess. Arts, music, band, sports integration, we hear that almost every time we're out in the public with a public meeting, and it comes across on both sides. We have kids that say that's why they're in school, that's why they're interested. We had one parent who said, I'm involved because my son is involved in sports, but you know what? I can't pay the $3 ticket charge to see him play, and that bothers me. So we get all kinds of reasons why the things and comments about the things that you're looking at more specifically. So as you go forward, there will probably be a body of ideas that support the recommendations that you find are appropriate.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Is there an opportunity to include in this outreach work an education component? And by that I mean really educating people about what our schools offer. We often hear people who have bad information about our schools or just have heard the negative. And one group I'm thinking of in particular are realtors, and not to pick on realtors, but when families move into our community, oftentimes they're not even given an option of looking at houses in Columbus. And so perhaps there could be an education component where groups of people could really learn about programs that are offered at Fort Hays and Ames and our higher performing schools so that we can help educate people about the district and what it has to offer and dispel some of the bad information that exists in our community.
That's a good question, and we had a realtor who was in one of our groups, and and one of the ideas that came out of that group was to have an online resource center so that parents could go to this online resource center and find out about the schools that were in their neighborhoods or the choice schools that were out there, because, and this came up with the young professionals, they really had no clue about anything with the Columbus City schools or the charter schools because they didn't have children. But I had 2 pregnant women in my group, and they were very interested. But they didn't know where to go. They didn't even know how to begin to research the issue. So I think that kind of information is really important. I don't necessarily think that that's our job. I think it's part of the job of the schools to make sure that they're getting that information out to parents. Our job is to kind of collect the ideas and make sure that the voice of the public is engaged in this process.
I want to go back just a minute to your question, sir, regarding how aware everyone is, because we've put these expectations out there. One of the other things that we've done is really raise the awareness of what the commission is doing and what we have been charged in doing, because when we are at these meetings, we are asked, where are we going to see this? What's the outcome going to be? What are you going to do with this? Is it going to make a difference? So we all have a charge here to make sure that we address and be accountable for what it is that we're doing here.
Thank you. Commission Member Hudson.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My question, first thing, just comments anecdotally that I've heard from many in the folks in the LGBT community and teachers and those that work with LGBT kids say that cultural diversity, this is, so I pass this on first, that cultural diversity issues really need additional emphasis at the principal level or at the leadership level in the schools. Because it's hit and miss whether or not the LGBT folks are recognized within a cultural diversity program if they're supported there. So I pass that on. That's one thing. I'm not sure if that would come through in those questions, but I think very important, because there's some schools, Centennial is one, for example. They have a great gay-straight alliance, but other schools not good because of leadership. So, but I'm wondering, and it might go, Danny, to what you were just talking about, but if you drill a little further, do the folks who are coming to the programs, are they distinguishing between what the schools can do versus what the community can do? Or how are they envisioning their role or their neighborhood, their community, their church, their role in helping the students? I find that from a lot of folks, they're like, we just want to know what we can do. And I don't think it's an us-them proposition, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
And you're right. They come, number one, for them to come to these meetings, they want to know how they can make a difference. But depending on who's facilitating or who's at each table, different themes come up. If you're sitting with a number of teachers and parents, certain things come up. When you're there with the businesses, they're asking how they can play a role or what it is they can do for their local schools. But they all come because they want to help.
And if I may address that that's a good question. You know, when I went into this, sometimes we think that parents and students don't care. I mean, most of us, you know, the school system is what it is. But these forums and these public meetings have shown me personally, and Eric has been to a lot of my tables, that they care. That they care about their students. They care about their schools. And one of the things that have come out is neighborhoods, and you touched upon it, neighborhoods and communities. And I was drilling down, what's the difference between a neighborhood and a community? But someone said to me, neighborhood is about the little boy that's leaving school and maybe gets in a fight in front of your house. You know who he is. You stop the fight, you call his parents. That's a neighbor. Neighborhoods have stores that carry the logos and carry the colors of an East High School. We've lost that. And so from the neighborhood then becomes the community involvement. So I think you're right, and somehow we've got to get back to that. But that has been a thing that has been clear to me over these last weeks.
I'd like to add just one more thing, too, regarding your question, because I was really impressed with the fact that while people recognize their role and the school's role, they also recognize that it should be coordinated. So that even though, let's just say, I want to bring my group in, they really did feel that in order for us to maximize everyone's participation, that needed to be coordinated and there needed to be a strategic plan around that. So I thought that was really good from that perspective.
Yeah. Ms. Augustine.
I just have a comment. I want to say thank you because in the beginning, it was the focus groups were very uncomfortable to my group of people, and so thank you for working with me. Because it was hard for me. The parents were upset about the commission, not just the focus groups. They didn't understand. So I do think that you have brought some understanding to our community. So thank you for that. And I'm hoping that we can take these the information that you bring and combine it with maybe the conversations, the community conversations from United Way, so that we can get a look at an aspect of what's happening in our community. So thank you for that.
Any other questions? Ms. Martinez.
In light of the conversation that we just had this morning about the emerging diverse communities here in Central Ohio, you did reference that there were diverse representation at these community meetings. I was just interested in knowing, from your perspective, did you feel that there was a broad representation of all groups, knowing what we know about, the different cultures beyond just Latino and Somalis, who are obviously the largest populations? From your perspective, do you think, one, that there was strong participation from any of the other subgroups, and two, were there specific outreach efforts to those communities that you could speak to?
First. When we went out to the different communities, we did make it a point to do outreach to primarily the Latino and Somali communities. We also, when we divided the area into the 4 quadrants, like for instance on the west side, there was a great deal of Latinos and Somalis from that community. Those were the 2 groups that definitely came to the meetings. A lot of times the parents brought their children and the children would translate for them. So those were the 2 main groups that we got an opportunity to see quite a few that was represented at our meetings. And we had a few also in our focus groups, not only the public meetings, but the focus groups. And for the focus groups, we actually reached out and called and wanted them to be a part of that.
Thank you. I think we'll have time for one more question from Mr. Fisher.
Yep, slight question, slight observation, and maybe Kathleen, it's somewhat to you. When we did all of our economic development work and we went through similar community engagement in Georgia, I would note that, to tell you the truth, this is way more extensive than that ever was. You know, what I would find is a lot of cynicism of what do you do with it. Is this going to be another report that sits on the shelf? And so yeah. I think one of our challenges will be how we turn recommendations into action. But beyond action and implementation, I guess the question I have is for all of us as a commission to think about what recommendations will we have for continued community engagement at this level. Because at some level I might argue this commission needs to meet every month for the next 5 years, and I might argue that this level of community engagement, if it continues at this level of intensity for the next decade, that will be the point in time that we realize that we are really transforming the way we think about educating our kids. And so I think for all of us, and maybe Kathleen, to put you on the spot, I mean, how do we think about what or have you thought about what recommendations we as a commission could take for ongoing, sustainable community engagement in a formal way that is as broad and diverse as that of which you all have laid out in a very short time period?
Best practice shows that when the community is engaged, the school is going to excel. So keeping that community engagement front and center, structuring opportunity around that is really critical. So many people have left our public meetings saying, this was great, can we do this again? And I think what it does is it gets people excited about the opportunity, it gets them excited about the participation and the difference that they can make. So I would say that one of our recommendations will be to you at the end of this is that there be some sort of ongoing community engagement among all players, be they parents, be they business, be they retirees, be they families without children, because everybody, no matter what their station in life, feels very strongly about education being the difference maker, and that without a strong educational system, we are leaving children behind and we are failing as a community.
And if I may add to that, the other piece to this is the goodwill. You know, at a lot of these meetings, people are saying, nobody ever asked me. I mean, they're excited about being a part of this process. We're talking about teachers. We're talking about students. I had a 14-year-old or 13-year-old at my table who tried to take my job over, and Judge Marbley took a picture with him. But he was so excited about being asked his opinion about being in school. So the goodwill is definitely there, but you've got to take this beyond that. While you've taken their information, you've got to do something with it.
Thank you. We're going to exercise the prerogative of the chair to get the last word in.
And mine is a question. It sort of dovetails into Alex's question. How do we sustain the enthusiasm of not just the parents, teachers, and students, but of the community who no longer have children in the system, because we're going to need their support for subsequent levies and the like. And, you know, one of the things you often hear is that, well, I'm not going to support the levy because I no longer have children in the system. But, you know, what our community looks like is somewhat a reflection of what our school system looks like, irrespective of whether you still have children in the system. So what ideas do you have, if any, as to how we can sustain the engagement, the involvement, and the enthusiasm, so that when you know, the board comes to the community for support on the levy, there is community support because the community sees its investment in the schools and the benefits of it?
I'll take that one, because I had a person in my group that had the perfect idea for you. And I think it was at Lyndon McKinley High School. She said, we need alumni groups at every one of our schools. You know, you think of how many of you are active in the Ohio State Alumni Association, or how many of you have a tie to Ohio State. That's the kind of tie, they said, that alumni from a high school should always have back to that school. We should harness that interest in their Bulldogs or Panthers or whatever their team was, and keep them involved. Many of those folks live in the community. They haven't moved that far away, and they would welcome that opportunity. So that was just one of the ideas, and there were several other good ones that would respond to your question.
Great. Thank you again for your outreach and for your good work and for this insights. Very helpful to us. So we'll I'm sure as we do a little roundtable at the end here today, we'll probably hear a little bit more from some folks who I think had some observations or questions. So thank you for your time.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you.
We are going to do the best we can to finish on time here, and I'm going to turn it to Eric. I think this is really the moment where we're going to take a few minutes, and we'll probably need to do these in little steps to review some of the work that we've done in the past sessions and take a look at the summaries. Yes, Eric, you'll guide us through this. And so I'll turn it to you.
Great. Thank you. So in your notebook tabs, you have a tab that says Topic Summaries. And I'll let the chair decide how he wants to go through these, but you have seven, I believe, topic summaries here. Of course, we've had, prior to today, We've had 5, am I getting my numbers right? I'm we had 2 in January, 2 in February, and right. So we had 8 topics that we covered. Of the 8 topics, the topic of state and local government didn't seem to require a summary. A couple of the thoughts on that are embedded into other topics, but did not seem to require its own summary. So you have 7 topic summaries here. 6 were prepared by the staff, for which I take, of course, personal responsibility, but I also thank my colleague Mark Reel, who's sitting to my left, and our other colleagues from Battelle for Kids and others who've helped us, Jeanette Alexander and others. And 1 was prepared by a little working group amongst the members of this group who have particular expertise in early childhood education. So when we come to that one, Mr. Chairman, I'd suggest you call on Mrs. Crane for her thoughts on that. I would say that our goal, you can see each one is divided into facts and ideas. Our goal was to highlight the key ideas that were described and the key facts that seemed to resonate both from the readings, from the experts, and from the discussion. Our goal was to be as objective in reporting this as we possibly can. We also had a goal of trying to be as short in our summaries as we could, because ultimately we will have to boil down our thoughts and our ideas into the most salient points. The reason for this exercise, and then I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, is that, of course, after we conclude our meetings where we have substantive discussions of issues, the staff is going to be charged with preparing draft recommendations, and it's our desire to make sure that we heard correctly from the Commission what were the points that were of greatest interest, so that as we begin that preparation, we are rooted in the Commission's thinking, and of course our thought then would be to endeavor to draft recommendations that would grow out of these documents.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Obviously, time is tight, and by definition, since we've summarized here, we are probably going to have missed a few things. My suggestion is that we take just a minute with each of the subjects, and then we open it up for any quick observations, meaning, did we miss something very important? Is there an insight that was shared by this group from our work among ourselves and with the experts, and just to make sure that we capture that if we've missed it in these documents. So I know this is going to be a tough exercise to do very quickly, but I think that's probably the best call here. So if we could take, again, we'll just take a minute on technology, and we'll just go one by one very quickly. Take a look and see if there's anything that screams out as missing, or that distorts something that we think we might have heard among us. And then I'll call on the group.
Want music like in Jeopardy?
Okay, we could play the music while you're waiting and reading. But any observations? I might have one small addendum after hearing some come to. Yes, Alex.
You know, what doesn't come across here with the whole discussion of online and how online can bleed with teachers, not to replace teachers, but supplement and help go to the pacing of individual student plans, and allow those that are behind to catch up and those that are ahead to go further. So I kind of missed that when I read quickly over this.
So I think, it's probably captured a little bit in the 5th bullet, but I think what you are noting, which I think is worthwhile, this talks about it from the student perspective. There's actually a perspective of enabling teachers to do work in a different way, and maybe that's a worthwhile note to make, because it does sort of touch on this blended online notion. But not adequately. We're fine punching that up, and if you guys agree, maybe also bringing the dimension of the teacher into that is probably worthwhile. Yes.
What I think is missing is community broadband.
Thank you.
Because there are certain neighborhoods, I think we saw that have very little access to broadband.
Agree. In fact, I agree. We could probably add that, the fourth bullet, which talks about this, but it doesn't really address the fact that it might literally not be school-related, but totally community-related. The other thing that I heard earlier that we might note is that we also want the teachers to be fluent as well, and we might just say that we also need to give them the time to, if we're going to get the technology working properly, everybody should sort of be on the same page. And that was something we heard from the community feedback, so maybe that's worthwhile noting. Any other comments? No? Okay, so let's... Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The next one, when you get to quality teachers, are we going in order?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So we're going to move to defining success, a very, very simple subject, of course. So we'll do the best we can here, folks. And if you could, again, just observations. If we miss something, let us know, and we'll ask Eric and team to make sure we integrate it into our summaries.
Mr. Chairman, I would just add one correction. We've been advised that the Ohio State University ACT average that we listed is old, and
Okay.
it's now 28.1.
Okay.
So we will make that correction.
Noted.
One of the things that's missing from my vantage point on defining success is what our aspiration is, and so I read all that and agree with it, but I want to understand aspirationally what does success look like. How would we define success?
I agree with that. I think that we need, one of the things that we do at OSU is there's some benchmark institutions. Fortunately, unfortunately, we don't have, U.S. News and World Report rankings and the metrics that they use, but we do need to do some benchmarking, and that may be where best practices will be folded into this. But I think that one of the things we need to do is to develop some metrics or some benchmarking.
We heard a startling report this morning, and I kind of observed the silence, I think, as everybody absorbed it. My question is, well, what do we aspire to be? We now see the facts glaring at us. What's our aspiration?
Okay, noted. Other observations, comments?
Yeah, I would make one,
Yep.
Chairman, that I don't think we pulled out and talked about the new third grade reading mandate as a success factor and what its impact will be on us.
Absolutely correct that we didn't say the impact, but the third bullet calls it out. But we can beef that up.
Thank you.
If that's the will of the committee, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, that sounds fine. Other comments? Yes. And then David. Try it now.
Consistent with the earlier presentations today, that a well-rounded education includes arts and emphasis on wellness as well.
Okay, thank you.
This may be a little more tactical than strategic, but as we talk about implementation, I think it's worth putting out there. As we define success, we ought to have a placeholder for how we measure it. And really looking at it from a longitudinal standpoint. We talk about completion with connection, and whatever happens at this stage is feeding into the next step in a student's progression, and the ability to measure that over time. I think it's something we ought to consider. One of the reasons I think we over rely on test scores is it's something we can measure. So if we want to replace that, we need to do that carefully.
Okay, good observation. Anyone else? All right, we'll advance to the next subject.
Okay.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I think we need to nail down here, and it's reflected in the third bullet point, but it's maybe a structure that would enable Columbus employers to provide internships. Whatever. I just don't want it to, and it doesn't have to be limited just to our business, but it can be expanded to include things such as government entities and that type of.
Thank you. Yeah, there's some really interesting work being done outside the U.S. With systems in which the interaction between the community and the business community and the students is much more closely linked.
I just had one comment. We did talk quite a bit, or we did talk about kind of career academy approach, or in high schools, kind of small learning academies, and I don't see anywhere really talking about that. That's more of that connection between high school career readiness, credentialing, and so there's just no discussion of that.
Yeah, I think we probably were heading in that direction in the 914 pathways, but we can call it out in a more explicit manner there, Screen.
Yeah, let's do that. What else? Sorry, we're navigating the microphone on this subject. Any more comments? We'll advance to the subject of quality teachers and principals. Yes.
Thank you. One of the things that the mayor mentioned in his State of the City address was working on recruiting and retaining the best principals, and he talked about a public-private partnership to recruit the best, and I don't see that here, so I think that needs to be added in for recruiting. And then the other piece that's not missing is, what about higher education and making sure that they're doing the work also around providing high quality.
You're talking about the readiness coming out of the schools of education, et cetera.
Pre-service education.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
One of the things that we also talked about Teach for America, and I think that should be reflected there. There should be an effort undertaken to bring TFA here, because they certainly have distinguished themselves as providing a good resource for high-quality teachers. The other thing that we need to do is to more formalize a relationship with schools such as OSU, Columbus State, who train teachers, and to be able to share best practices and to serve as kind of a giant lab for, what some of the trend lines are and what some of the beneficial data is showing. So I would add that, but certainly TFA.
Thank you.
Yes. Ms. Perkins, were you up? I thought you were raising your hands.
Okay, thank you. Will the summaries that we are focusing on, will they include data and ideas from the public forums that we just heard about?
I can assume so. Eric, do you want to tell us how we'll integrate that?
Yes. We will absolutely separate. This is meant to summarize the work of the commission meetings, but as you saw, we've begun to gather the public input, and we will have that side by side. So when you see draft recommendations, you'll see these documents that you're reviewing today, plus the public input, and you'll see the line between those to the draft recommendation.
And one more question.
Yes.
In terms of the data, do we have a comprehensive list of all the ideas that have been submitted, or both? I see both heads shaking. So,
totally everything.
As was mentioned. There is a summary that is posted the morning after each public meeting, and it's pretty remarkable. They do a really good job of getting as much of it possible. We also have every flip chart that was utilized. So the answer is yes, we will be able to generate a comprehensive list.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. I think Alex, go ahead, Ms. Augustine, yeah. You're on. Yes? No, you're not. Carl, maybe you could turn that off. No? I'm learning.
I thought we talked about something about firing fast. I don't see anything here about getting rid of bad teachers or, some of the barriers with, being able to get rid of bad teachers or, how to evaluate principals or the autonomy of allowing a principal to guide his staff without a lot of barriers in a way.
Yeah, we obviously did hear a lot about, again, it's a little bit of a crude language, but hiring slow and firing fast was this notion we heard about, which is recruit very, very carefully, but make sure that our teachers are performing at the
I think we spent more time speaking to and thinking about the importance and influence of principals, and I don't know that it's captured here at the same level of importance as teachers, and I would just go back and review the possibility of adding more around
that might be highlighted. Fair enough. Ms. Marjo.
And along those lines, I think emphasizing experienced teachers. I think there's so much emphasis. I think there was an early discussion about the hiring and firing fast, but not as much emphasis on retaining good talent and working to improve talent and improve education. So there's an emphasis, for example, on well-educated and continuing education for teachers, and I think that should be emphasized.
Thank you. Helpful. Thanks. Okay, Alex, and then we'll keep going. Yep.
Yeah. So maybe not too repetitive, but I think the conversation on the source term and the getting into the fact-based, the number, percentage-wise of teachers that come out of the Ohio State University would be helpful, because I think we should publicly be, in a better partnership. The role of the state's land-grant institution, its hometown, that we should expect a special relationship from my vantage point with Ohio State. And then the whole concept, Pat raised it, but we also talked very specifically about a principal leadership academy, and is that a way to partner with OSU? So
is the point that, again, I'm trying to make sure we capture it properly. It's just to draw more heavily on that relationship, but also begin to influence. I mean, are you talking also about influencing both the curriculum and
the reason I want to call out is because I think we as a community, should be articulating our expectation of the source term in the partnership of the land-grant institution in our community. And I think that's not to suggest that it's necessarily bad. I just think there's so much more we could be doing.
Okay. We'll try to find some way to capture that. Yes, Reverend.
Excuse me. We already have a Principal Leadership Academy. Now, what could be helpful if we provide information to the group in regards to what has taken place and how that program works?
That'd be great. Love to see that. We have, Reverend, I think you were next.
Thanks. I wanted to just piggyback on what Mary Jo had said earlier, because we all know that the easiest thing it is to do is to fire somebody. That's easy. The toughest thing is to work to improve and help people to move to their potential. And you would have people who could do better. And I think that we clearly want to have that implemented in. And I do think we need to be careful in our language when we talk about getting rid of bad folks, because there's some bad in all of us. But we want to
noted
get to improve, and I just think we need to be careful with that.
I agree. I think again the right balance in our language. This is really, I think we've talked about this a lot about accountability in our our leaders in the schools and the teachers. And so I think, again, the language we use can be provocative and sometimes create more problems than we mean. And I think we were talking about making sure that we are attracting, retaining, and developing the best, and that we're holding all of our teachers accountable to high performance. And then if not, we have a game plan to remediate or to make changes. So I think that's right. Fair enough. Yes.
And I think it's important for us to, really concentrate on what the wording is, because this particular year, there's going to be a lot of retiring going on. So we'll have a lot of openings for educators, and I mean, maybe even more than we expect because of the pension changes. There's a lot of people that's going to be retiring.
And Mark mentioned to me, I didn't want to hold things up, but we should have noted that the commission did ask us to gather information about the, for example, the number of teachers we hire out of Ohio State, and we are gathering that information and some of the issues that Ms. Augustine just raised also about pending retirements and such. So that report will be available by the time we draft our recommendations.
Yes, Ms. Bartley.
Yes, and I just want to answer Alex's question regarding Executive Principals Leadership Academy. There is one at Ohio State. It was through an ODE grant for $3 million. There have been 8 cohorts that have gone through that. It was specifically for poor performing schools from around the state of Ohio, but it's a collaboration with the Fisher School of Business, where they're really teaching principals to think like a CEO. So that is something that we can look at going forward as far as training principals.
If that's a good thing. Anyway. Sorry. I couldn't resist. Thank you. It may or may not be a good thing, right? That's okay. So thank you for that clarification. Good. All right, we're going to try to keep moving. I know this is a hard way to do this, but we're making a little progress. So, okay, so we were going to we spent some time on charter schools, and let's see if we captured the discussion of that day. Any comments? Anyone? Yes, Mr. Shelton.
I had requested if I could get a list of the charter schools that were in Columbus and their grades. So I wanted to see if I can get that. And I'm not really clear on this bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because there's like, I guess when I'm reading it, I don't feel like there's an end result maybe. I'm not sure because there was an example in the paper recently of a charter school that was closed and then reopened and then maybe closed again, or, and so I feel like there's no end result. It's just giving me information. So I don't know, what do we want to do with that? What do we want to do to keep charter schools that are failing from just changing sponsors, or sponsors just keeping them open because they're getting fees,
If somebody, thank you. First of all, just to reiterate, the goal here is not to make recommendations, right? The goal is to reflect what we learned. Clearly, a recommendation in regard to the bullet point that you referenced would be in order. The fact is, as best as we could determine what we stated here, there is a state law. It's clear, but for a variety of reasons, the intent of the law does not seem to occur, right? So it's evaded by changing sponsors, and it's evaded by going to court. The example of the school arts, which you read about in the paper, was a particularly frustrating example where every time the state moved to implement its law, some court action or some regulatory action kept intervening. And so I think this is an accurate statement of what we learned. The question is, what will we recommend to do about it?
Yes, Joe.
I think we heard during the presentation with the charters, and I think Carol pointed out well that there are transportation issues with the charter schools that need to be addressed through the school district.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, part of what, as I remember the conversation, it was really both encouraging high-performing charter schools and also holding all schools accountable for high performance, right? Charter district, and I think, again, that goes back to this issue of making sure we don't have particular loopholes that insulate us all from.
As we discussed, the challenge will be what can we do about it, and that'll be the subject of our discussions leading up to a recommendation.
Alex.
Finer point on the funding side. I mean, I think much of the funding discussion centered around the philosophy, recognizing that there are differences for sure, but the philosophy of dollar following the child, and that all children, and I think this came out of the mayor's State of the City very aggressively as well. So,
good, noted. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. I had a question about our process. I understand that these aren't recommendations, but since that notion came up, and I look here at the ideas, the last bullet point talks about Charter Leaders Report that the funding gap makes Ohio less attractive for networks of high-performing charter schools. Obviously, that's going to be something that we'll need to tackle. My question is, without having any idea about support or non-support for that particular recommendation of all of the funding following the child, will we be given information about how that has been implemented in other states to show both sides of that equation so that we can really, before we make public policy recommendations, weigh the evidence and the implications of those type of recommendations and the impact that it could have so that we can make a well-informed decision about that particular recommendation?
Yes, sir.
Yep, that seems fair. Okay, any other comments about the charter schools? We'll move on to facilities and neighborhoods, which obviously got a little more interesting after our feedback this morning, or this afternoon. That was interesting. So we might want to keep that in mind as we're reading through this.
I would probably add under the idea point about, let's see, there needs to be momentum at the neighborhood level to institutionalize community involvement. I guess I would add to also sustain it. I think that's what we heard today. Sustain it beyond the work of the commission.
And perhaps to include those whose children are through the system. Other comments on that? Yes.
And it's not on this, but just an assumption I'm making, so I just want to say it out loud. The topics we addressed this morning will then have their own summaries later, because I mean, I think there are some themes we keep thinking about related, but I don't want to make those comments because I assume those. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
We shall do that, and then again, I think part of the, again, I think realistically, treating these as separate and distinct things is probably a little bit artificial as we start to think about recommendations. The subjects that we're talking about as if they're different universes have to start to weave together. But we're just really trying to capture as best we can the day that we spent on these activities. So, okay, I think with that, I'll turn it to Tanya on this next subject, just to make sure. I know this is an area that you and others have been deeply involved in. So.
Well, the facts and ideas are here. There's a small group of us, Stephanie Hightower, Janet Jackson, and myself, along with a stealth research body that many are here. So, I mean, it's before you, but it's what we talked about. Only one I wanted to add is that nationwide, about 30% of 4-year-olds are in preschool, and in Ohio, it's less than 10%. So, I mean, it's really startling where Ohio fits in, and Columbus, as we were, we discussed during the early education portion, in Columbus City schools, about 20% of kids are in 4-year-old preschool. And then we know the facts about a third or 34% of the kids entering kindergarten are unprepared to learn. I mean, that means they may not be able to read at all, even know which way to open a book. And that leads directly to third grade reading, where we've heard that 40% of kids won't be able to pass that third grade test. So one predicts the other. So you can read the rest. But any questions?
Yes, Ms. Augustine.
I was on that preschool expansion committee too, and so I think what is missing here, and we did not hear about it, is that when that third grade guarantee begins next year, and so by the end of the year, there will be some children that may be retained, and so what they want to start is like a summer school program to get those kids together, but that takes funding, and so I think that may need to be added. Because they don't know where the money's coming from, but hoping that, okay, those kids at the end next year that's going to be retained can get that extra help. So we might need to add something like that.
Thank you.
I would add to this, and I don't know that we actually spoke about this during our early childhood discussion, but it strikes me that we've articulated, and we have the data around articulating what the problem is, but I don't believe there's a community-wide goal that is understood and supported in terms of what we're trying to achieve to improve in this area. And I think that's necessary in order to get us moving in one direction.
Okay. Yes, Alex.
So Tanny, I probably should learn more about the subcommittee and the work there. But it was my kind of sense when we spent the day on this topic that the idea of doing more of the same is not necessarily what's going to get us there. But yes, we need a commitment to do more, but we also need a commitment to rethink how we do it. And I guess maybe I'm just looking, we can talk offline to understand, the how piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do know what works. We know high quality early learning works, and it does predict readiness for kindergarten, but how we get there, I mean, currently, one thing we've just recently learned is for the past 5 years, our CARL scores haven't changed. So the same third of kids, 34%, are still unprepared. So what we're doing is not moving the needle.
Just want to make sure that gets reflected then.
Yep, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, a couple things. One, maybe we're not moving the needle because we're only reaching a small percentage of the children. So that means we need to have more people to have access to early childhood education. So that's one. The other is a couple things. One, I know that we're getting this information today and looking at it pretty quickly. So if we have additional ideas because we were into those meetings, we want to share those, we can still do that. Would that be correct? The other is to Eric. I know that we had a subgroup just on Friday, and so based upon talking about the community resources that are necessary that we've been using in the past and that have been helpful in some of the schools, and will that be a part of the ideas moving forward?
Yes, what Councilwoman Tyson refers to is a number of members of the commission had mentioned that they felt that a topic we had not addressed sufficiently perhaps is the role of social service agencies and the social service community in providing the necessary supports. So we did convene a small group of members of the commission who expressed interest in this, had a discussion about it, and we will absolutely, reflecting on the input we received from the members of the commission, bring that to the full commission. So it might well be, just thinking out loud, that the April 10th meeting, which is not yet scheduled, that could be one of the topics we bring to the commission that day. The other point, I think, is the one that Co-Chair Barrett made, which is a lot of these things really interrelate, right? So we talked about arts and health today and wellness. Many of the subjects we discussed around the table on Friday relate to that too. So, but yes, the answer is we will incorporate it, and all members of the commission will have a chance to reflect on that.
Thanks, Ms. Tyson. I also think it is important. We are doing this, obviously, reading quickly, trying to remember everything that we've done. So you'll have it, I mean, to the extent that you have additional thoughts, obviously you need to get back to us. I think it's important. So thank you. Yes.
So on this particular topic, and I know that the mayor's charge to us started with, I think, 3 or 4-year-olds, I continue to be troubled that we aren't addressing in this the continuing that starts really at birth and the educational, and I put that in quotes because I think we got to be careful about how we talk about educating very young children, but the effective early education, early child care needs, and having high quality in those, or we're going to only create a quality 3- and 4-year-old or 4- and 5-year-old program that then gets us to kids entering that unprepared. So I just want to just put that out there, and I did not see that in any of the comments here.
And I'll just respond. One of the reasons was practicality, and these aren't recommendations, again, these were just the ideas, but it was just the bites that we could take, but absolutely, we all would agree with that.
Okay.
Just briefly, I want to kind of calm your nerves, Alex. The preschool expansion is just saying that Columbus City School is producing quality preschoolers. They're ready for kindergarten, and so what that expansion is going to do is match them with the other preschool programs that are not doing the same, and give them the curriculum that is being given in the Columbus City School preschool, and make sure that the teachers are at the same level and the teachers are also getting the same professional development. Try to basically move them up to the same exact standards as Columbus City Schools so that we won't be doing the same thing, because what's happening is that 34% is coming from other preschools outside of Columbus City Schools.
Okay, thank you. I think we probably, it's about 3. Here's my suggestion. I know we have a couple things to do before we leave, and I want to give Ms. Tyson a chance to Payan to make an introduction here today, but also I wanted to give us one more chance to see if anybody had any more observations before we leave. So I wonder if Nancy want to do that now, and we'll take care of it.
Okay, thank you. Because the commission was meeting at COSI, I thought it was very important to invite Dr. Young Cheng Liu, who is my colleague and board member on Asian Festival. And yesterday the mayor spoke about, at the Columbus Council on World Affairs, the importance of preparing our children for a global economy. And I invited Dr. Liu to just briefly speak about an exhibit around the corner here in the Columbus Historical Society, and the importance of preparing our children. And we're bringing the world to the Columbus Public Schools and working with the school systems. Thank you.
Well, welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me here to share a few moments with you. I'm the founder of the Asian Festival. How many of you heard of Asian Festival? Oh, great. Thank you. Actually, I brought some flyers here, and I want you to have a chance to, if you could, come to the Asian Festival this year, May 25th, 26th, and also May 27th is our Dragon Boat race right behind the COSI. Now, the reason I'm here really is sharing my thought quite a few years ago. That is, established the Education Committee in the Asian Festival organization. My idea in establishing that education component in the Asian Festival Corporation is to bring Asian culture to the school system. And that is what I really dreamed on, and I'm still hoping that we can achieve that someday. But before I do that, last year, you know, that is our bicentennial of Columbus, and I shared my view with our mayor, and he just stood up and hugged me and saying this is really good idea, and that is that I want to have the Asian history exhibit. And that is at the corner in the Columbus Historical Society. I certainly hope that you have a chance to visit that exhibit, which I think it is a really top-notch exhibit. And that is not only to tell you that the Asian history, how we being grown, the Asian community grown in Central Ohio, but also is going to tell you some of the contributions that the Asian community shared in this community. And because of that, and you're going to see a part of what we did the research about. just give you a couple examples. And in the exhibit, you're going to see that who is the first Asian baby born in Central Ohio. That is in 1905. And not only that, and when is the first Asian come to this town? 1858. So you're going to see some of the history that I think will generate some of your interest, and I hope that this will keep your interest in the Asian community, and we're going to share with you from here on and how we're going to grow in this community and to be a part of the mainstream. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here and for your contributions to the communities. So here's what we're going to do. We've got a couple of minutes. I know a few of you had some comments you want to make. I want to give you that opportunity now, and we'll start over in that corner and see if anybody has anything that they would like to do, and we'll just sort of rotate through. Anybody? And again, no obligations for folks. The day's running long, so yeah. Want to just turn that up for 1 second? There you go. Try that.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Eric and the team that is working behind this commission for all the work that they are doing on a daily basis to prepare this information and this level of work. I just wanted to highlight the fact that it takes a lot of work to prepare for these kinds of sessions, so I wanted to give them a kudos. Thank you.
Agreed. Anyone else? Lois.
I'm sorry, if I could just have a couple of minutes before you guys leave. I had the opportunity to speak with the mayor and Mr. Fingerhut a week or so ago, and I know we just had successful conversation about the public forums, but I represent 3,000 members with Columbus City Schools. I'm the president for Columbus School Employees Association. I'm also a resident in Columbus City Schools. I'm a graduate of Columbus City Schools, as well as my children and my grandchildren currently attend. I have an investment in this district, and I know this is an honorable commission formed by the mayor to solicit advice and opinions from the community and business leaders, that so we could work together to make our schools the best they can be. And when I started on this commission, I thought we would be working together to identify and expand successful district programs while finding solutions to areas which need improvement. But it seems clear to some members in the community that this body has become a vehicle to change the way our district is run and governed. With each meeting, we seem to be moving closer to a recommendation that Columbus City Schools should be run differently, not by the people that we've elected, but by outsiders with limited ties to our school and communities. I challenge the premises that a new leadership governance model will improve this district and help our children. In fact, there is abundant evidence that these takeover models that either change or dismiss the elected representative scope and authority simply do not work. From Washington, New York City, Chicago, Philadelphia, and other cities, public schools have been turned over to non-elected managers with terrible results and a lack of community trust and involvement. No improvement in test scores and graduation rates. The schools have closed, corruption, and disruptive of vital services. I truly do believe that reform is vital. I also believe that there are many honorable and concerned commission members here with me today and who share my concerns that our mission and scope is veering to a predetermined outcome or change our process for directly electing our school board governance and authority over administrative matters. I feel that this imposed set of recommendations is not truly representative of community process from the ground up, but rather decided earlier in the process. This is not going to be healthy for our community. And I truly trust that we ultimately are all working for the best of our children. At the next meeting, I would like to introduce into record a comprehensive and detailed policy paper where these experiments have been implemented and how they have failed urban children. I look forward at the next meeting to presenting this and having further conversation. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to express the concern that is out there in the community. The concern is there, and I think we need to listen as well as listen to the positive. It's like the elephant in the room we don't want to address, and we do need to listen.
Thank you for your input. Other comments? Anyone in the room? All right. With that, it's been a long day. Thank you for your time. We've got some editing to do, I guess, as a group, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. We are adjourned.